Welcome to another episode of The Horrific Podcast. We're two friends who live in different places but share a love for scary movies. In each episode, we both watch the same movie on our own and then record a conversation together later about what we liked, what we hated, if we were scared, and maybe even some larger truths about why people watch horror movies in the first place. The theme of this season is Back to Business. The past couple of seasons have involved deep dives on horror history, and this time around we're taking it easy with all of that, and instead focusing on talking about what is most interesting to us in each of the movies that we watch. So kick back, relax, and enjoy it with us. All right, we're back, and this week we're doing another movie featuring Art the Clown.
Are we?
Nah, we're actually doing another movie featuring Morty from The Fear.
That was kind of a legit question because I half-ass a lot of my life. Yeah,
one of these days I'm going to get you. But yeah.
Where did you hear about Oddity?
So, I'm so glad you asked.
Thank you.
Oddity is probably the movie from 2024 that has come up the most in recommendations on the horror subreddit. I routinely check that just to see kind of what movies people are talking about, especially when they get into like, what are your recommendations for the most like fill in the blank horror movie? Mm-hmm. Because I'm just always interested to see like what people say and how people perceive some of the movies we've seen. And a lot of people have recommended Oddity as one of the most scary, like legit scary movies of 2024.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I stopped looking at that a long time ago. Maybe I should start back up.
I just don't have a lot of friends to talk to in my free time. So they're like, it's like, yeah, me and the boys are just hanging out talking horror tonight.
I just don't have free time, I feel like, honestly.
Well, you know, as a head of the household, the free time you get is your bathroom time.
You're damn right. Yeah, that's true.
And sometimes you just sit in there with the door closed.
That's true.
And you do a little Reddit browsing, okay?
Yeah, and if any of you listener out there tell our wives about that, I'm going to be pissed.
Yeah, they have no idea. They just think we have bad digestion.
Yeah, they're like, are you okay? Your stomach seems messed up. It's like, yeah, that's right.
Mm-hmm. I'm just so worried about the well-being of this family.
Yeah.
I care too much. Yeah. But anyway, this one comes up a lot, and it's on the horror subreddit, but it also seems a little bit polarizing. So a lot of people mention that it is, you know, one of the scary movies of 2024, and then lots of other people say, no, it's not. It's not actually scary. And so I was just kind of curious to see what the hype was about, because this movie was 1,000% off my radar otherwise. Yeah. So the fact that it was getting kind of like that much buzz really intrigued me and made me want to look into it.
Which is kind of surprising because I feel like this is right up our alley as a podcast. Mm-hmm. Like I feel like this type of horror movie is one that we definitely would have talked about. That's why I had to ask the question at the beginning, which as people who've been around for a minute, no, I don't usually do that. That's out of the ordinary.
Yeah,
I was legit curious. I was like,
you like wouldn't have heard about a movie that we cover. So yeah. So this one was interesting. I didn't really know what to expect going into it. So I had seen, you know, obviously people arguing over whether it was scary or not, but I had purposefully avoided reading any details. And, you know, I thought we were off to a good start. Like there was a very good kind of psychological horror opening of the movie. And then when there was like the Oddity title card, just like, yeah, okay, we're in good shape here. I can hang.
Yeah, I kind of had the same thought too. But I feel like I usually go into horror movies like I don't want to say cautious, but just like I don't want to be fooled or something. And I feel like I learned my lesson with, what was that dope movie that you suggested last season? One of them, and it was about the family where the Australian girl like just kicks everyone's ass.
Oh, was it You're Next?
You're Next. And then I feel like I got kind of fooled by your next, because I went to start watching that with the thought of like, God, okay, here we go. I'm sure it's just gonna be a run of the mill. And then like the intro was pretty gnarly, and I was like, you're an idiot. Just accept things. So, but I was stoked with it.
Yeah, and this one feels like a pretty big departure from what we've been watching so far this season. This one is much more of like kind of that dark, brooding, psychological horror type thing, whereas, you know, it didn't have any of the elements of fun. You know what I mean? Like, you weren't supposed to have any fun watching this movie like you were with Slay or even the Terrifier movies. And so it was definitely a lot more like dark and brooding and psychological and heavy. And I'm here for that.
Yeah, without a doubt. Did it remind you of... I kind of had like a feeling like I've seen this film before, but I couldn't necessarily put my finger on it. But I felt like kind of like the atmosphere was kind of Babadook and The Witch and like a few other of our favorites that we've seen before. Did you have anything like that?
The two that I wrote down that it reminded me of were like The Fear meets The Lodge.
Yep, perfect.
It was interesting to me because I know we're not doing as much like research this season, and by research I mean reading Wikipedia pages and watching YouTube videos. Yeah. But I did legit want to go look into the influences for this movie. Like, who did the director or the writer say they were influenced by, or what other movies and stuff. And they brought up a bunch of them, but they didn't say The Fear, which really surprised me. Just because, like, giant wooden doll that comes to life, you'd think that'd be kind of the obvious
right
choice. But they were talking more about, like, Child's Play. And what if, you know, the doll that came to life was, like, full size and you couldn't just kick it across the room? Yeah. Which in the making of the movie, I did not see any influence at all from Child's Play. So that's kind of weird to me.
Yeah, that's why I'm kind of confused. Like, that was a legit what? Because, I definitely feel the same way. I also had the thought when I saw this gnarly looking wooden creature that this would have been a good substitution for Pinocchio's Revenge.
Yeah. This is like
here's an actual scary looking.
Like, what if that movie was good? Like, it would look a lot more like this one. Yeah.
Yeah. I remember it specifically going like, Pinocchio's Revenge could have used this guy.
Yeah. Yeah. And this one I thought overall was pretty good. And one thing I wanted to bring up with you was just how I feel like this is one where the plot actually helped the horror. Because we talk about a lot of times with horror movies, they try to get over the top with like some crazy plot that's hard to follow, or a storyline that has so many holes in it that it's just distracting, or it doesn't get wrapped up so it doesn't feel resolved at the end. Like, this one definitely didn't over explain things, but there was just enough of the twists and turns that it kept it interesting and helped things move along. And it kind of reminded me of like The Ring. In that way. Like, this one wasn't like a big, you know, investigation or anything, but it just had just enough kind of twists and turns to it and kind of left you thinking back and like re-examining some of the scenes and revisiting some of the scenes and setting you up to think one thing, but then showing it actually went a different way. That I thought that was great. I thought that the whole movie, like, even when there wasn't something like actually super violent going on, there was enough to keep you kind of pulled in the whole time. Yeah. So I really enjoyed it. And I think that's a hard thing for psychological horror to do sometimes, just because it is so much more like suspense and dread and nuance.
Yeah, I think that it definitely, and here's the thing. I just can't remember anything today, so I'm just going to describe it.
I'm here for it.
Being in the rural house reminded me of a horror movie that we watched with Kevin Bacon in it, where like the house was like changing. Yes. I don't remember what that was called, but it kind of reminded me of the same like feeling and atmosphere. But you hit the nail on the head with the plot like driving this. If we didn't have that, then this would have probably been a pretty flat movie, but like as the story progressed, you're learning more and more, and the horror is kind of keeping up with it for a chunk of it. There is a period where it's just kind of like you just almost feel a little uncomfortable watching, but not necessarily like uneasy or anything. But the whole atmosphere that kind of I picked up from this film, like it, like there, I don't think I watched this and had. We'll also talk about how you'll have sometimes they throw in jokes, and it's kind of nice because it breaks up like the intensity and stuff. This one I didn't feel like had that, so it really, you were just in the horror pocket, the dread pocket the whole time, just kind of feeling dreadful. And you know, for some reason this one really kind of worked on me. Like I was definitely caught off guard. I didn't do any research whatsoever before. I had no idea what this movie was about. The only thing I knew was that it was on AMC Plus and Shudder, which we both, one of us had. So I was like, that's all I knew. And the whole time watching it, you know that people probably aren't who they seem. Man, you just don't expect what kind of came out of the film. The other thing I want to say as well, but Carolyn Bracken, who played Danny and Darcy, I thought, you know, we grew up, we're 90s babies basically, and you know, so we're all the TV shows that were around all the time. You always see like the episode where like one actor plays two characters, like because they're like twins or like cousins or something like that, and it's just cheesy and all that. I felt like with this, like she portrayed both of those characters so differently that it really felt like there was actually like two different actresses playing. I feel like personally,
I was today years old when I found out that those were the same person. So, nice. So she had me fooled. I didn't even look it up.
Yeah. So it blew my mind. I was just like, because I was like, I wonder, like, was this actual twin? You know, that kind of thing. I was like, oh, this is one person doing this, and they're so distinctively different that it, you know, one of them was almost like more, or Danny was almost like more vulnerable, you know, and all that, and Darcy she honestly was like scared the hell out of me at times.
Yes, she was very effective.
Mm-hmm. It was weird because she was the good guy technically in this crazy film, but at the same time, like it was like watching Ted Bundy, you know, do a good deed or something. Like it was just like, it really just kind of uneasy. Now you have the whole thought of like, this is revenge. So obviously, like, you know, you find out someone murders your sibling, or, you know, you're going to lose your mind and want revenge kind of thing, which she did very well. She got that taken care of, but every turn was just a twist.
Yeah. And that's one thing I really liked about it was that, you know, talking about how the story kind of helped the psychological horror element of it, is that those twists and turns, you really didn't know who to trust or who was the good guy or who you should feel empathy towards.
Yeah.
And so, other than, I guess, in the beginning with the wife when she was there alone and the door, there's the guy at the door and he's saying someone had followed her inside and that she's in danger and everything. And in that one, you're pretty clear, like the movie's telling me that I should be on the side of the woman, but you didn't know if that guy was actually a bad guy or not. You just suspected it. And then as the movie goes on, it's like all of a sudden Danny is the one who is the dangerous force in the house, and you're kind of worried on behalf of the other two because she seems somewhat crazy. But then you realize, like, oh, there's this other guy who's the orderly at the hospital who is actually a real bad dude. And then you're like, and what's going on with this like possessed wooden doll? And then you're like, oh, but actually the husband was the baddest guy the whole time. Like, just the way that it kept twisting, it was like you never really felt comfortable in knowing where you were in relation to the characters or where they were in relation to each other. And that was part of what kept it so interesting, is just about every time you thought you had it figured out, all of a sudden you didn't.
You know, I don't think that. So Darcy was the blonde one, right?
I probably got it wrong.
I just don't remember. So I'm going to say Darcy's the blonde one.
The blind one?
The blind, yeah.
Yeah.
So when what was her name? Yana or whatever, the girlfriend's name, the one who he cheated on, when she was like digging the stuff out of the wooden mannequin's head and the scream comes from Darcy, that scared that didn't scare me, but I was definitely uneasy when that yell of like, put that back now came out, because it was like a roar almost, and it's just
and it had been so quiet while it was happening, and that was one thing. The sound in this movie, the way they used the sound, I thought was great,
and the fact that like that Carolyn who plays Danny and Darcy, like she turned on the heat with this from the point of view of like, or from what I mean by that is like once she finds out by touching the glass eye of what actually happened, it's almost like it's no bullshit kind of thing. Like she's just so straightforward and so, like when they're saying like, well, I got to work tonight and she's going back to the city, she's like, well, I'm here. Yeah. Can't I just stay or something like that, and then it didn't stop. It was almost like she was kind of like subtly torturing him in a way, like, make you guys come back or stay here. And it was awkward. It felt awkward until you realize like, oh, she knew what happened, and why would she be charming or kind or anything to, first off, the reason why her sister was dead was because he was in another relationship. Also, he was just a terrible person, and I don't know. And I know it's not the first film where, psychiatrists can put, I'm sure that where they can put someone in a mental institution to like save their ass. But like, I didn't even necessarily think about that idea. And that was almost a little bit more intense than anything. 'Cause it was like, holy shit, this guy could potentially get away with this right now. He's basically saying, because he's a professional in this field, he works at a mental institution or whatever that was, he could just put anyone away.
Yes, and there were like no consequences for his actions, and so the whole like revenge plot and everything, you just got kind of blue balled on, which was frustrating. But yeah, I definitely. So I want to ask you at the end a question more specifically about the husband and the doctor and some stuff with him. But before we get into questions, I did have one other thing I wanted to bring up, and that's just that this was another one that was Shudder. So like that was part of the intro, and so we've seen a couple of these now, and we talked last season about how now the streaming services are players for like acquiring distribution for some of these up and coming independent horror films. Yeah, and so I wonder if maybe that's why we didn't hear this one as much. Because, like, if Netflix acquired a movie that was going to be a Netflix exclusive and it wasn't already super well known, I think they'd use most of their advertising money on Netflix subscribers to get them to watch it. And so I wonder if maybe, like, Shudder kind of did a similar thing with this one where, like, in the app, there might have been a bunch of advertising for it among people that watch psychological horror movies, but just for those of us on the outside, we didn't see much.
That's actually a really good point. I don't remember if it came up when we were discussing that, but yeah, that definitely has to be the case. We're pretty, like, the algorithms have it me dialed in as far as like horror stuff goes. So like, I feel like it's like a constant in my social media feed. And I really, and maybe it's just the name, being Oddity, I don't know, but yeah, it was really off the radar, but I bet you're right on the money that it has something to do with the marketing of it.
Yeah. And I didn't really look up much about the director on this one, but I've heard that he has another movie called Caveat that a lot of people have mentioned as being really good. And I'm hoping we can come back to that one at some point this season if it's available to stream somewhere, just because I was impressed enough by this one that I would like to check out his other movie as well.
Yeah, that was actually something that I read after watching this, that this is the same location as Caveat. Like the same converted barn in County Cork, Ireland, that was used for that film.
It's kind of a step down from that one guy's Castle where they filmed Castle Freak, but you take what you can get.
Yeah, 100%.
Well, do you have anything else, or do you want to get into the questions?
I said we do questions.
Cool. You want to kick it off?
Let's do it. What was this movie's deal?
Well, I'll tell you what this movie's deal was. It was a dark and brooding, mysterious, psychological horror film through and through. It had some good plot twists, and it was a very serious movie, and it had just kind of like an overall kind of dark, almost hopeless vibe to it, but was pretty clever and just, an interesting world in which to set the movie. So if you're a fan of like psychological horror in general, I think this would be a good fit. And the movie making of it was really high quality. So you didn't have to like look past any, well, the sound's really bad, so just put on the subtitles and deal with it because the story's good or anything like that. Like it was just all around a good movie to watch.
Yeah, I threw in, I actually forgot that I put this in the note, but Hereditary too, as far as like the while watching the dread that you have, kind of watching that.
That's a great call.
Reminded me of, yeah.
Well, I got a question for you.
Oh, okay.
Why did that blind lady have so many pictures in her house?
Oh, God. Why did she have so many pictures in her house? They say, I don't know. So they say that, I remember something in the film, she was saying like she can, like if it's a personal item, she has like better readings off of it or something. So I wonder if her touching those pictures have something to do with it. But the fact that they were up and
hung on the wall.
It's framed. Yeah. Now I know that she also inherited her mom's store, so maybe that was also inherited at the house or something. But I agree.
Yeah,
I didn't actually catch that, so that's maybe that's why I was like, oh God.
It just made me immediately think about that scene in Savaged where the deaf girl is using the payphone. Yeah. I was just like, well,
yeah.
I don't think there's any deeper explanation. I think the writer just forgot. So anyway.
Yeah, without a doubt. Did you have any favorite scenes?
Well, so yes, but there were a lot of good scenes, but the thing that I think stood out to me most about the scenes in this one was a tactic that the director used several times. And that was like just the way they would set up the scares. So like even from that very beginning scene, the woman is like looking out the tent and she's looking really intently at that dark doorway. And so you're just waiting for a thing to come out of there. And then all of a sudden the guy comes like at you really fast from the side. Mm-hmm. And then there was one where just a couple of things like that where it was like the camera was focused on what the character was looking at, but then the scary thing would come from somewhere else. So it was almost like over the top, setting you up for the jump scare from like that spot. But then the thing that was actually happening was not there. And so that was done too many times in this movie not to be like very deliberate.
Yeah.
And I thought that it was pulled off well, especially when it was putting you in the viewpoint of the character.
Yeah. Yeah. Right on the money. Like, because you also like want to stop, like if it's showing like a dark alley or dark hall or whatever, movie you're watching, sometimes you just don't want to, like you watch long enough that the anticipation kills you. Yes. And you're just like, all right, I'm done with this. But with that, they're just like, psych, it's coming from the from another angle. Yeah. I think my favorite scene was when the guy shows up to tell Danny about what's going on and like that whole conversation they were having at the door. And the reason why is during that, while watching it, I didn't know what to think, but you are questioning like, is this guy good or bad? But then when you find out what actually happened and you think about that scene, you're like, oh, this guy was like legit nervous and trying to help. And like how terrible of a feeling what terrible situation for both people to be in for one, but like the fact that he's like, okay, I'll go into town, I will get police, like he was just very like matter of fact and like legitimately scared that something was going to happen. And so I don't know if I can remember a scene where like where it wasn't my favorite when it happened, but when I look back and like all the things that happened through the film, it's just like, shit, that was intense.
Well, it was just so urgent, but also so unclear what you were supposed, like what the right choice was.
That's true.
And the thing that was going through my head in thinking about this movie after the fact is like, what would I have said if I was in his case?
Yeah.
Because I just can't even imagine the right way to play that situation. You know, like 100%. Woman is in her house alone at night and you're a creepy looking stranger on the front porch trying to explain to her that she's in danger inside the house so that she could come out where you are. And it's just like, there's no way for me to make this argument that does not make it seem like I'm trying to kill you right now.
Yeah, and and the fact that like he was honest about how he was a patient of her husband. Obviously, she knows what her husband does, so like
that it makes it even more sus.
Yeah, so it's like he's doing the right thing. He, but and maybe that was like a theme of this, but like doing the right thing, unexpectedly or something. But yeah.
What do you think the budget was on this movie?
I think especially after reading the fact about how they reused the same location from the film Caveat, and it was done in Ireland. I think it has to be modest. Like, I think that we probably had a few B movies last season that had a way bigger budget than this. Maybe like $600,000, maybe? Is that too low? Is that too
Honestly,
high?
I could not come up with an answer.
Yeah.
I tried to look it up all over the place and I couldn't find financials on it. I saw like how much it made at the box office, but I didn't see anything about what it cost to make it. Mm-hmm. And the reason I'm so conflicted on it was because I felt like it was very, very well done. Like everything about the movie making of this was excellent. But I also feel like they used all these tactics that we talked about all last season that B movies would do to save money. 100%. So it's like a relatively confined space, a very small number of characters, and there were some special effects, but not like a lot. They weren't trying to pull off, the whole house is on fire and you've got CG flames everywhere or anything like that. Like a lot of the shots were pretty like tight within one kind of small location and stuff. And so, and even thinking about that, like the way that you would mic it and light it, you just need less stuff in smaller spaces. And so I really don't like I would believe that it was really low budget, but I would also believe that it was kind of more mid budget for what they were doing just because the quality turned out so well. And the fact that we don't know what the budget was means that these people really know what they're doing as far as like how to make a movie within your means and make it convincing and not letting whatever your budget is mess things up for you one way or the other.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. Is it my turn?
Yeah, dude.
So this is kind of a two-parter question.
I'll allow it.
Sorry, I was thinking how I wanted to ask this like an idiot. So I wanted to ask this question because it's not like a typical rural house horror, in my opinion. A lot of times you see rural house. I can't say that word.
The rural juror.
When I was a kid and I lost my front teeth, I had to go speech therapy, and I had to say this word, and it just anyway. So I wanted to ask you this question because it's not necessarily a typical like rural house horror, but what did you think of the film setting in the isolated rural house, and did it add to the overall atmosphere?
Yes, I think so. Yeah. And I think that intro scene, like very much, that couldn't have worked in any other environment. If she'd been in an apartment building where somebody could hear her scream, the whole urgency around it would have just disappeared. Like that setup, and even kind of the overhead shot of like being out away from everything, like we've seen in a million horror movies, really like played that up. And so I think that was great. But then also like that scene that you called out where the doctor had to go back into town and the, I guess, girlfriend just wanted to get out of there to be away from the sister. And she's just like, nope, I'm staying here, so I guess you're staying here because we're out and super far away from everything. Like, that was kind of the perfect setting for the events in the story of the movie, I thought.
Yeah, I agree. It was not. I mean, Your Next kind of had a similar vibe to it. But that was common with kind of those rural houses where people are like, getting cut up or shot or whatever. With this one, it was almost like a ghost horror without the ghost, and it was almost like a slasher without the slasher.
Yeah,
but it was good. Like it just kind of tripped me out a little bit, the atmosphere. And then when it just in you and I talking about this, I was thinking like, man, they could, since they converted this barn into, to this house, like the other side of the barn could totally have been the office to, the mental institution or wherever, he worked, so it was like, man, because I was thinking about the budget, how it was probably off. I was like, man, they could have probably like been a lot lower considering, they could have just used that barn as their whole, there's not too many people. So anyway, that's all.
So my last question for you.
Yeah.
It's going to take a little bit of setup, but at the very end of the movie, Darcy is dead.
Mm-hmm.
Ivan, who is the only other person who knows what really happened, is locked up in the mental institution.
He got his toe bit.
Yes. God, that scene. The doctor goes back to his farm house out in the middle of nowhere. There's a package on the door, and it is the bell that Darcy had said could be used to summon like a ghost bellboy.
Mm-hmm.
And then the doctor hits it, and then eventually the bellboy ghost shows up and stands next to him, and he just kind of like smiles.
Yeah.
I was expecting that was like a trap. Like he was going to do it like jokingly, like there's no such thing as ghosts, and then the bellboy would come like tear him apart or something.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not what happened. And I just have no explanation whatsoever for how this one ended after everything else in the story felt so like deliberate. Mm-hmm. So I was just wondering if you had a take on that or an explanation or what your thoughts were on it.
Yeah. So the way I kind of see it is almost like maybe like dark humor or something. But, the bell was brought up when he was at the shop of Darcy, when he was talking with her about what happened with Danny and when they scheduled to come out a week or two later. And like, I remember like specifically talking, like mentioning this bell, and she says something about like how it was her mother's, basically like supposedly if you hit the bellboy will come and whatever. The thing I can't explain about the ending is how the bell got there. I don't know. I also can't explain how she was able to see what actually happened from touching the glass eyeballs. So maybe I just shouldn't know, kind of thing. But the way I interpreted that ending was he didn't see the bellhop behind him, meaning he is about to get his ass handed to him because he did defiantly push the bell after knowing that will bring him back or something. So I do like to think that he got what he had coming, which he should have.
I would like to choose to believe that.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's the haunted bell from earlier in the film. Ted, even though all this other supernatural stuff happened during the film, he still was just like, there's no way this shit's real, and still rang the bell. Like, Darcy knew what happened exactly to her sister, and the only way that probably could have happened was through some supernatural force or something. And so he kind of dismissed the bell, he rang it, and then the ghost of the dead bellboy standing menacingly behind him. And Yeah, I'm going to choose that his fate, a.k.a. his ass, was handed to him.
Well, that's the world I want to live in, so I will accept it.
I feel like this is definitely like I feel like this is definitely like a British style ending to a horror film. Obviously, it's right there, being in Ireland. But thinking of what's the one where they go down in the cave?
The Descent.
Thinking of like The Descent, where supposedly like the British ending was like
the gnarly
was the one where there's no happy endings, and there's no secret to we definitely prefer that for if it makes sense, obviously, but that's what we consider like a true horror ending. So I felt like this was similar to that, where you're still not given exactly what you want. Like in The Descent, you want them, like I feel like normal people want others to survive if they're the good guys, and in this case, you didn't necessarily get what you want, meaning Ted got his, but there's still a chance. So
I'm here for it. Yeah. I thoroughly enjoyed this movie.
Same.
I am thoroughly enjoying this season because the whole point was just to catch our breath a little bit and just enjoy watching some movies that we're excited about. Yeah. And I feel like mission accomplished so far. So we'll be back next week with whatever we decide on coming next.
It'll probably be a movie that came out a week before. Or a week. Fuck me, God.
And that's it for today's episode. If you've listened this far, then thank you, and we hope you've enjoyed it. We're always looking for new ideas, so if you have any questions, comments, or movie suggestions, please send us an email at thehorrificpod@gmail.com. Or hit us up on the IG. That's what the kids call Instagram. Just search for The Horrific Podcast. Thanks for listening.